Hey everybody, it is Wintermute coming to you from the think tank, and today we're going to talk about the Commonwealth and their technology options. Now, one big issue the Commonwealth has in this game, excuse me, is they actually don't have a lot of technology dice to begin with. They only have two. They have a major factory in London and a major factory in Ottawa. So one of the first questions the Commonwealth player is going to want to ask themselves is, do I want to get another die? Is that worth it? And that's going to be up to you and your playstyle. If you are going to upgrade, what choices do you have? Well, you've already got an existing minor factory here in Northern England that you can upgrade to a major factory. You see the guy here in my game did that. That's not at all a bad choice. You've already got the money invested, so you might as well just invest a little bit more, make it a major factory, and get your third die. You have another option down here in Sydney. You can see you also upgraded that one. And you can, because that one's already a minor factory, and this is considered homeland for Anzac, so they can go ahead and upgrade to a major factory here. So in this game, he did both. So he actually, Britain was rolling 4 dice at one point. Now, you are looking at this game post Sea Lion, where I held this Northern England for like 4, 5 turns. So he's only just now getting all 4 of his dice. But 4 dice is not, it's nothing to sneeze at. It'll get them tech. Is it worth it to invest that IPP to be able to get that tech? That's going to be your decision. I don't think that is one of those things that is, you can say, it's, there's no way to easily break that down. It just depends on how much you want to play the tech game. Those are your two obvious choices. Um, in some ways, you could argue the Sydney one's a little safer because it's so out here. It's difficult for Japan to hit. It's if they really wanted to take Sydney, they could probably take Sydney. Um, but in the meantime, maybe you're just going to squeeze as many dice out of that as you can, if that's their intent. Or maybe you start upgrading it and then to a medium, and then you realize what they're going to pull, and you're like, I'm not going to invest any more money in that right now. Um, you know, uh, so there's a lot to consider there. Are you going to want to build another factory from scratch? You certainly could, but that's a lot of money, and Britain is money starved. And that is going to be something I will bring up probably quite a lot, how starved they can be for resources in the game. And not just because of the war itself. They really don't have a lot of IPP to play around with. They have a lot to do. They have a lot of world commitments. They've got a lot to get done. And I think building a second major factory in London or in the British Midlands, as great as that would be, it might be a little frivolous. Now, there is argument for building at least a minor factory in the British Midlands to, logistically, that helps a lot. Whether you want to make it another major factory, that's going to be up to you. But yeah, they're cash strapped a lot of the game, even without the war effort by the that they're actually trying to wage, in the sub war and all that, and they're not going to have, and they have very few tech dice to start with. So that puts a lot of pressure on them to pick the right technologies, and really ones that will have a big impact on the war. Now, I'm still going to talk from a perspective of what if they wanted to go for a tech that isn't a top tier tech, what can they get out of it? And maybe some things, maybe think of it in some ways that aren't obvious. So, with that in mind, much like I did with Japan, I'm going to talk about advanced mechanized infantry, advanced artillery, and heavy armor kind of all at once. Because a lot of the reasons why I said Japan would want to possibly go for those is the same reasons why Britain would want to go to those. You have, let's say you've got 3 transports ready to drop off and do a D-Day, or at least an opening kind of D-Day thing. Would you rather have 3 Marines and 3 infantry, or 3 Marines and 3 artillery, or would you rather have 3 Marines, 3 advanced artillery, 3 Marines and 3 advanced mech, or 3 Marines and 3 heavy armor? So in terms of maximizing the firepower they can bring to bear on a single point, a single location, yeah, there's something to be said about going after those technologies. Now, as far as getting to utilize these technologies, one thing that is nice now in this edition is when you get these advanced technology units, they can be built away from home country now. So if you get advanced mech or advanced artillery, or even advanced armor, you can build them down here in Cape Town and start rolling them up to Egypt or over here to East Africa. Anzac can start pumping them out. And the obvious advanced artillery is going to be good for defense and offense, but it's slow. But if you want a little more ability to move around, advanced mech might be a good way to do that. Because once you get that, you can start building two advanced mech, and at least they can reach Rhodesia and then Sudan in two movements without, assuming you don't want to use your rail or you need to use your rail for other stuff. So there's a lot of open territory here in Central and South Africa that makes it desirable to build fast-moving units sometimes. And so if you are a player that likes to have a lot of fast-moving units around South and Central Africa to be able to keep the Italians hemmed in or respond to whatever they're doing, yeah, maybe you do want to go for. Maybe it is worth it for you at some point to go after those technologies. But I still am not going to put them on the top tier for Britain personally. But I could see choosing them over some other traditional technologies based on your playstyle, based on how the game is unfolding. Now, radar. I generally consider radar to be a top tier for Britain right off the bat, for a number of reasons. Defending convoys gain +2 to their convoy roll. So this is automatic. Your convoy lines are defended all that much better now. You're not killing the subs, but you're limiting their usefulness right off the bat. Especially if your opponent has advanced subs, well then at least you're making them like normal subs now. So the amount of money that can save you in the long run is pretty substantial. Bases and major naval facilities may scramble an unlimited number of units. Well, Britain has a huge navy, and so being able to do this is probably going to benefit them. I would wager, and this is just speculation, I would wager it'd probably benefit them more than any other nation in the game, including Japan and the United States. Maybe even more than Italy, just because of all the major ports and facilities and everything that they have all over the map, and with all the options they have to be able to kind of put away their fleet and then pull it out as needed. And so being able to pull the whole thing out in a response in one shot would be, I have no doubt that is going to be useful for Britain. Maybe not in an obvious way, but down the line, game after game, I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for the British player to be able to, really bring the full might of his navy to bear in certain fights where that's going to be very crucial. So I believe that one would be very, very useful for them. And the airbase one, now I know I've said before, I generally don't see many air bases that have more than 3. They're just really expensive units. You generally don't have enough time to stack them. Though, if you're going to see a lot of it, you're likely to see a lot of it in Britain itself. And they have an airfield in 3 of their 4 home territories right here. And you can already see here that the United States is sending over jet fighters. And things like that. So if any area you're gonna see a lot of fighters just stacked up, it's probably gonna be an area like this, the home country of the UK. So being able to we're just gonna stack 6 fighters here in the British Midlands and a couple more in London for good measure. You know what? You've got pretty good coverage at that point. You're going to raise 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fighters into a single combat. Yeah, you know what? You're doing pretty good at that point. So that's a hell of a defense network right there, or hell of a radar network. So I think that would be useful to help defend the home country. Britain's probably going to have a couple fighters in London anyway, or the Midlands, and then just to have the United States just drop off whatever they want, and they can all get up. That'd be great. Then fighters gain +1 interception. Yeah, that's going to be good. If you are doing an air war, any sort of strategic bombing campaign against Germany, or if you are the target of one, that's just good all And there are still times where that absolutely happens. I don't see it happen very often. I think major strategic bombing campaigns are kind of difficult to do in this game, though they're more desirable now in version 4. But being able to swing anything in your favor if that happens is going to be beneficial. And this isn't just you responding, this is all interception. So when you're escorting, that's a +1 to your interception value. So that if Britain's the one doing the bombing campaign, that's going to be even better. And facilities inherent anti-aircraft may shoot at strategic rockets. Yeah, strategic rockets are good for Germany to get, without a doubt. And so if you have a German player who's going to go after them, that alone may be a reason enough for you to want to kind of invest in this just so you can help protect against them. Fighters able to intercept and scramble from heavy fleet carriers. I don't think heavy ship construction is worthwhile for Britain personally. So I don't put a lot of weight in that one. And a +6 modifier to opposing battlecruiser die roll. Now, I've seen this one be very useful against me in this game, where I took my British or German battlecruiser and I brought it down here off of Anzac, and I put it in raider mode, and he sort of just danced around here, and he had to put a lot of effort into hunt it down and sink it. So if he had been lucky, if he had had this, his chances of finding me and sinking me would have been great, because while he's sitting here, he's just raiding this line and he's denying them the +2 bonus income. So if you have somebody pulling some crap like that, as the Commonwealth, it'd be nice to be able to just stop it. Okay, stop. We're going to hunt you down. We're finally going to hunt you down and kill you now, because it can be very frustrating trying to catch battle cruisers. And again, I know Japan has I'm pretty sure they start off with at least one battle cruiser. Maybe they're doing something very similar. Maybe as soon as you sink the German one, then you're like, okay, that's over. The Japanese come down and start haranguing you with it, and it's like, oh no, because you can sink a battle cruiser without this. This just makes it a lot easier. And maybe Japan wants to come down and relieve the German if you get lucky and you're able to sink it early. And you're like, oh, okay, keep rolling for radar so I can get rid of this damn thing. So all in all, I think radar is really useful for the Commonwealth across the board. They have more convoy lines than anybody. They've got. I think that they're going to want to use naval facilities more than anybody. I think out of all the nations, there's a high probability they get involved in interception combat quite often. They're probably going to be the target of strategic rockets if they start showing up in the game. And I know that there's tactics out there that involve battle cruisers harassing the hell out of them. So I think radar is really good for the Commonwealth. I put that at top tier, and I would probably roll for that most games right off the bat. ASW. This is another really popular one for the Commonwealth, for obvious reasons. Now, I will say, I don't consider this one top tier for the Commonwealth. It's definitely second tier, and a lot of it is going to depend on what kind of opponent you're playing. If you're playing against a German player, or a Japanese player for that matter, who just love their subs, yeah, you know what, go for anti-submarine war, go for it. But there's also German players who will never invest in subs other than what they start the game with. And I know the current meta is that France sails all of its subs over here, so that if they go Vichy, Japan gets them, and they're not raiding British convoy lines right off the bat. And they're just going to sit over there in this part of the Japanese Navy until the U.S. comes after them. So there's a little bit of tit for tat there, but it helps preserve the convoy lines over here for the Commonwealth. So a little gamey, but that's the rules. So with that said, maybe you got a German player who, okay, so the French, all their subs are off in the Pacific. The German player doesn't really want to invest in subs right off the bat, so he's only going to have one or two to start the game with, or whatever. I can't think of what it is. It's not that many. And they're just not going to invest in it anymore. They just want to invest in the ground forces. And you know what? That's a fair strategy. And if that's the case, is it really worth it for you to start rolling for anti-submarine warfare? Probably not. Conversely, and obviously there's the opposite end of things where German player is going to build a subaturn. wherever they can. They're going to at least drop one sub a turn, and they're just going to keep you out here dancing all over the place. They're going to spread out. They're going to raid all these lines, and they're just going to keep you busy all the time. You're either trying to catch them or you're just letting them do their thing, and you're trying your best to ignore them. And now ASW helps stop subs. Now, let me compare the two here. Radar helps defend your lines very dramatically. A +2 bonus is really good. Convoy lines gain +1, so it's half as good as radar for just that one roll. But if you go for radar, you have no shot at just killing the sub outright, just taking it off the board. And that's pretty good. If you get a little bit of luck, it's only one or two. But if you get a little bit of luck, you start every turn. Maybe he's got 6 on the board. Well, if you roll 6 times, eventually you're going to start getting hits, and you're going to start chewing up that sub fleet, and it's going to just slowly whittle away and become less and less. And so at least you've got a shot. You're getting some defense. You're mitigating the damage they're doing, and hopefully you're killing them when you actually roll. So anti-submarine is much more aggressive towards subs as opposed to radar, which is a more broad list of bonuses, whereas anti-submarine warfare is more effective at what it does, but it's a little more focused. And in regular combat, all naval transports defend 1 against attacking submarines. And if you've got 5 transports there, that's at least 5 more dice. Yeah, they're 1s, but if you get lucky, okay, that's another hit or 2 on a sub. Sure, take what you get. And of course, if now at least the subs, if they attack them out in, like something happens and you don't think his sub can reach your lone transport out there. But that you missed it. You didn't see it, and he says, "Oh, I can just go sink this transport." Well, he has to roll for it now. And you start rolling dice after die after die. Well, eventually maybe he keeps missing, and you get lucky and you get that one, and suddenly that sub thought he was going to get a free lunch and just go, a nice tasty transport. Well, that's not the case anymore. He has to actually roll that fight. And so that gives your transports, it helps them not get picked off by subs. At least gives you a fighting chance. And sometimes, yeah, you're going to get lucky. You're going to get, at least you're going to take the sub with you, or you'll survive and kill the sub. And so again, anti-submarine warfare is really good if your opponent loves their subs. If they're not a big sub person, maybe it isn't worth your while. And the last bit is seaplanes on map get +2 attack bonus against submarines. Okay. I'm still not a huge fan of seaplanes personally, but I guess it's better than nothing. And if you are somebody who is using seaplanes, or at least the seaplane you start with, you're still using it, well, that's something. If he's got a lot of subs, maybe it is worth it to build a seaplane or two to help supplement your initial seaplane fleet and go sub hunting. So I actually put radar at a higher tier than I do anti-submarine warfare. I would hold anti-submarine warfare to, depending on what I think my opponent's going to do. But if I think my opponent's going to go heavy subs, I'll start rolling for it right away. Improved factories. Now, I really like this one for the Commonwealth, and I know some people don't, and that's fine. The reason I like it for the Commonwealth is that it just gives them, it takes what they already have on the board and just makes it a lot better. Just like, Germany is, likely going to get, they're going to have this factory here in Warsaw. They're going to have this factory in Romania. They're going to have this factory in minor factory in Paris, let alone anything else they might build or do anything with. And then all of a sudden they can start putting 2 units there a turn. Well, Britain's kind of in the same boat. It is worth it to be able to build 2 units a turn up here in northern England, assuming you haven't upgraded it, especially if a sea lion is being threatened. You want to have some units up here to be able to counterattack if he goes into Scotland first, or he comes into the British Midlands, or just reinforce this spot. If you think he's going to come, okay, well, you know what? Let's drop 2 units here this turn. I think that is useful. Is that a reason alone? No, but let's look at the rest of the Commonwealth. Well, you got a minor factory here in Cape Town. You have a minor factory here in Calcutta. You have a minor factory here in Sydney. So right off the bat, there's, I think right there, that alone is a reason to go after improved factories, to double the output of those facilities. And um, when you look now, of course, there's more to be said about the FEC and what it's whether what they should do, whether they should build another factory or invest in their Gurkhas or colonials and whatnot. I prefer building cheaper units if I can get away with it, to cheaper infantry if all they're going to be doing is defending. I prefer to have the regular infantry at the bargain value, just the regular three bucks. So I like having this minor factory being able to put out two of those guys a turn, or not having to, or at the very least being able to put out two artillery a turn if things are getting heated over here. So kind of same thing with Anzac. Anzac can, when you're getting $7 a turn for Anzac, or let's say nine. Let's say you are getting your income bonus and nobody, you haven't lost any income yet. Let's say nine. Well, you want to build, and you're not going to upgrade this factory. If you want to build more than just one guy a turn, you're going to need this factory to build. You're either going to need to upgrade this factory or build another one, or improve factories. Something. But of course, that also depends on what your goal is with Anzac, and you may not care about ground units. You're going to build a sub a turn or whatever the case is. But I still think it is worth it to, although if you're going to build a sub a turn, maybe you also want minor ship guards upgrades, so you could drop two subs on the turns where you have $12 in hand, depending on how you build them, depending on what your overall strategy is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of argument for improved factories being worth it for Britain. Also, let's say you've got some guys in London, but you've been focusing a lot of your building out in the rest of the empire, and then all of a sudden the German player drops. He builds two transports, two marines, and he builds an airborne, and he repositions his fleet, and you're like, uh-oh, he's coming for a sea lion. But you haven't. But he's never threatened a sea lion up until that point. Now he is. He's taken a turn and he's invested a ton of money into a sea lion play. And now you as Britain are like, uh-oh, I need to start investing in the home country. Well, yeah, London is worth 3, so you can build 3 militia and you can build 5 guys. Or would you rather build 8 guys to defend London itself? Because maybe he doesn't want to attack London right away. He wants to come up here and take this and work his way down. Well, would it be better for you to be able to build double the amount of guys up here? So that you can help repel that attack. It allows you to focus more where you might need it when the time comes. And there are times where I've played Britain and I absolutely capped out all those build slots at the major factory in London. And I'm like, man, I wish I had 3 more. Hell, I wish I had 5 more. Because I need the units in there. Not only do I want to build an AA gun, I've got to build 2 Marines. But those Marines are shipping out. But I've also got to build some artillery. But that's probably going to ship out. I need to build an AA gun to have it there. I've got to build another airborne. Well, I can't build the things I wanted to build now because I easily cap that out. And sometimes it has really constrained me with what I wanted to build in London to be ready to go in upcoming turns. So, being able to up that cap for London, I think would be very beneficial. But again, there's a lot to be said about play styles. And so when I'm saying that, think about your play style and whether it applies to you. But I do like improved factories for the Commonwealth. So improved construction. This is a very good one. But it is not automatically a top tier for me when it comes to the Commonwealth. And here's why. Now, a lot of people were like, what, really? Here's why. And I actually, this game here, I did a ton of damage to the British Navy. A ton of damage. I mean, it is paltry compared to what it used to be. But in the end, it didn't really matter. and he still hasn't had to build a symbol because he had so many ships to begin the game with. He still hasn't had to build any more. So he really would have never gotten any value out of improved construction. So when it comes to the discount on ships, maybe Britain won't get as much out of it as you think they will because they don't necessarily need to build a ton of ships. Now, of course, again, it depends on the way the game plays out and the kind of player you're up against. And maybe part of your goal with Britain is you have a very specific plan on the types of ships you want to build, and you know you get improved construction, the cost of those ships just plummets. So absolutely go for it. Um, but there are games where I've played where I have seen played and played the Commonwealth where really I didn't need to build that many ships. You think you do to cover all these convoy lines, but sometimes it just ain't worth it. Now there are obviously reasons you're going to want to build ships. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that the FEC wants to build some ships to supplement the fleet that's out here. And they do, I believe they start off with a shipyard now, and so being able to build a cheaper destroyer a turn, if that's your goal, yeah, there's absolutely something to be said about that. I also know that some players who play Anzac will just they'll kind of get the home country kind of fortified, but then once the war starts or right before it starts, they'll start just dropping a sub a turn, and that's it. They're going to sail them off, and they're going to harass the Japanese fleet wherever they can, raid these convoy lines wherever they can, and and especially if you've got a Japanese player who isn't somebody who likes to come after Anzac and threaten Sydney on the ground. Okay, well maybe you don't need to invest a lot in here, and so you want to pay uh, $5 for a sub every turn as Anzac, and get them out there just harassing the Japanese left and right. So I think improved construction depends a lot more on your play style than at first glance. When it comes to that a lot of the reasons why people would knee jerk go for it as the Commonwealth is that discount on ships. However, the ability to speed up ships, the more and facilities, again, that's really good. That's good for most nations. You, as the Anzac player, or I'm sorry, the Commonwealth player, may go, "Oh, you know what? I see what Italy is doing, and you know what? We need an airfield in Eastern Egypt if you don't already have one there. We just need to build an airfield there. We need to do that. That'll and get a fighter over there, and that'll solve a lot of problems." And the ability to just do it, just get it built, pay the $6, pay full boat, get it built, can be absolutely valuable at times. Um, or even a fortified line, fortification. You know what? We know he's coming. I'd like to do the double turn to get the discount on the fortification, but you know what? I gotta just pay the money, and I gotta just drop the fortification right where I need it at that moment because it's that important. And that is a really good option to always have in your belt, really, with any nation. And you'll hear me say that again. With any nation's going to want to be able to just drop a facility right where they need it when they need it, even if they got to play full boat for it. Now, in this edition, the desire for improved construction might even be higher for the Commonwealth than it was in previous editions because of the way they can reduce damage to the factories now. And if you have a German or possibly an Italian player who's being very aggressive with their bombing, well, that is going to be very useful. And that's another point I forgot about factories is I know it's not unheard of to build a factory in Eastern Egypt. Well, if you build a factory in Eastern Egypt, that also now it can become the target of Italian bombing. Well, maybe you want improved construction now so that you can help at least defend it a little bit and keep it up and running. So, yeah, I think improved construction is absolutely it's a high tier for for the Commonwealth. But is it going to be beaten out by other things? I think a lot of that's going to depend on your play style and your opponent's play style, and you're just going to have to adjust to the situation as it comes. Let's see, Airborne Doctrine. Now, I am fairly certain, again, I don't have a lot of experience with Airborne Doctrine. I am fairly certain this is going to be a good one for the Commonwealth. fairly certain. And the reason I say that is being able to drop two, three threes in Bavaria all of a sudden, for example, is going to be a real pain in the butt for Germany. So the very fact that you have it and you've built even just one heavy transport with the airborne to go with it is going to force the German player to start manning these backfields in a way or putting units in centralized locations. Great, okay, you took Bavaria. Well, now I've got to go attack Bavaria. But maybe you take Bavaria the same turn you take Aquitaine, and so now his counterattack force has to decide which direction it's going to go, just for example. So you're giving him too many targets to deal with all at once. Now you can do that with standard airborne, don't get me wrong. But if you can drop off two, three threes as opposed to a single 2-2, the amount of firepower he has to put into that to retake it is substantially more in most cases. And it could spread him too thin. So I'm fairly certain airborne doctrine is going to be a really good one for Britain. Without a, yeah, I'm almost positive. Not to mention just being able to drop two additional airborne into each one of these landings, or okay, you're going to drop in Belgium, but then but he's got a counterattack force here in Paris. Well, Picardy's lightly defended, so we're going to airborne into Picardy, take Picardy probably, maybe with a little bit of air support, and now his counterattack force can't come up into Belgium. Which, now that I look at this map, is something I need to consider for my game when I get back into it. Shoot. Oh, okay, sorry. Anyway, but just for example, and a single, let's say there's just a militia here. Well, a single 3 versus a 2 ain't that great of odds, but having 2 threes turn after turn against a single 2, well, that's a much better fight. Now I'm guessing you're going to throw in a fighter or something to help end it really quick. But all things considered, just to be able to double up the amount of guys you can drop, it just really opens up a lot of possibility. It opens up a lot of possibility when it comes to harassing the Germans, to stymieing their counterattack efforts, to keeping them on their toes in the backfield, to opening up. Maybe you were only going to do 2 attacks into Belgium and Picardy, but you know what? Now that I've got those those airborne doctrine, I can actually come over here to Denmark, and I've got 2 heavy transports and the airborne. So you know what? Let's just drop 4 airborne on Denmark. Yeah, now that's going to really that's going to spread him thin with his counterattack, assuming he does want to retake all those territories. So anytime you can, up your firepower, it gives you more options. And so airborne doctrine does that. It ups the amount of firepower you can bring to bear at the enemy at any given time. So I am fairly certain it's going to be a good one for the United Kingdom alone. Now, there are, of course, other options where I'm sure you can see it's valuable. Let's say they get airborne doctrine and Japan is not really messing with Anzac all that much. But so Anzac goes, you know what? Let's build a heavy transport and the airborne to go with it. And then we're going to just start island hopping and doing whatever we can and setting our guys up. So we're just going to, now that forces Japan to keep units behind for one. Or he doesn't defend them and you just kind of, come out, pick up, drop off, and just kind of keep on going all over the place with those airborne. So in theory, FEC could do the same thing. Though I would say probably the Anzac are in a little bit better position. They're a little more remote and they can kind of position guys in a way to kind of be able to reach out and drop off and then come home, pick up again, and keep on kind of just doing island after island. FEC's got other problems, but on the other hand, the ability to maybe he leaves these 2 territories. He's not worried about defending these 2 territories, so because he's pushing this way, well, you see an opportunity to just swing a what am I trying to say? Swing a heavy transport or something behind him and drop off guys, maybe knock out some militia if he's got some there. But it just opens up a lot more possibilities, and it really gives those airborne units a lot more punch and a lot more sustainability on the defense, seeing as how they defend on 3s. And again, like I said before, it is possible to, if you look at them like just regular infantry that are 3-3, and you have no intention of ever using them as airborne, you just are perfectly willing to sacrifice a defense point for an offense point because you want to go on the attack, and you don't want to pay $4 for an artillery, you want to pay $3 for an elite airborne. You know what? Do it. I think that's perfectly reasonable. It's a reasonable way to look at them. So yeah, I have no doubt Airborne Doctrine's a good one for the Commonwealth, though I have not played with it or seen it played yet. So Amphibious Doctrine. This one kind of falls into the same category for me as ASW. A lot of it's going to depend on your opponent and what they're doing and what your overall play style is. The Commonwealth starts off, I want to say, with 5 transports. And they can easily build a couple more throughout the course of the game. And it would be nice if they're assault transports. But is it worth it to invest in this technology when regular transports will do the job just fine, and thus you should invest this research point into something else? And I think there is an argument to be for that thought process to go through your mind as you're playing the game, as you're thinking about your opponent, as you're thinking about what your overall strategy is. Is it absolutely worth having as Britain? Yes. Absolutely, I believe it is. Assault transports are really good. And so being able to, bring that extra firepower to bear on the first round is really good. And, for nations down here, FEC and ANZAC, who are never going to have let's say ANZAC finally is freed up enough to be able to build an assault transport or a regular transport. Let's say they can build a regular transport. Okay, well, I can put in an infantry or a marine. We'll assume it's a marine and a medium armor, but then the Marine goes in, and then the medium armor has to follow up, or be able to just go, no, we've got assault transports, we have Amphibious Doctrine, let's go over here and attack, and we're going to have that tank, the medium armor, and that Marine drop right away. That's a lot more firepower being brought to bear, and increases the chance of them to just be successful and just go island hopping all that much more aggressively. So is Amphibious Doctrine worth it for the Commonwealth? Absolutely, I believe it is. But what are you not getting to take it? And would you be better off taking that other thing instead? And again, I think there's an argument for that, but I think you're going to just have to make that decision when the time comes. Heavy armor. I already talked about heavy armor before with mechanized advanced mech and artillery. Now, jet fighters. I think jet fighters are an absolutely valid choice for the Commonwealth. They are, just better fighters overall. If you are doing a lot of bombing or you're being bombed a lot, and you need to use that intercept rating, well, then an intercept rating of 5 is fantastic. And if you've got radar, it's a 6. You're hitting 50% of the time with your interception rolls. That's pretty impressive. God help it if your opponent doesn't have jet fighters and they don't have radar either. You're going to be chewing them up pretty good. Now, a lot of players aren't going to fly into that, but so that alone is enough. If you've got a jet fighter or 2 sitting there that are going to hit with radar, that alone is going to deter a lot of potential bombing raids by the Germans. I think that alone will deter it. They're not going to want to roll those dice. But so yeah, jet fighters are good. They are expensive. Britain doesn't have a ton of money, and that's going to be a little more. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more with some of these other technologies that are coming up, because so far most of these technologies aren't that I've talked about so far. They don't cost a lot to invest in, like advanced mech, advanced artillery. They're just a straight up improvement to what you're going to be using anyway. The other ones just take effect right away. You don't have to invest anything additional into them. Airborne Doctrine, your airborne are just going to automatically get better. Now, heavy transports do cost a pretty penny to build, but it's not drastic. And even just one of them is going to be worth it if you can swing it. Heavy armor is a little bit different, but again, it's not a huge bump for the stat increase that you're going to get. Now, jet fighters, though, are expensive. They are 12 IPP. And I think it is perfectly reasonable for the British player to cut a deal with the United States player and say, you know what, I will research jet fighters. I want you, in exchange, I'll research jet fighters. You then lease me the strategic bombers. So you're not having to pay for the strategic bombers. You're just going to pay for the jet fighters. And then they're going to escort the bombers, the U.S. built bombers over Berlin, or, well, over Germany. And so, yeah, that's worth it. Being able to escort with jet fighters is, the dice are really in your favor at that point when you can start rolling on those interceptions. I mean, I think, once these fives, possibly sixes start showing up, and your opponent just can't match that, they're going to leave their fighter. They're more likely to leave their fighters on the ground, and you're going to reign supreme in the air. So yeah, jet fighters are a pretty good choice. Now, one issue with them is they're a good choice for the UK, but are they a good choice for the FEC and the Anzac? Maybe not so much. Um, maybe now, and that is one thing that I didn't bring up with the Commonwealth is you gotta think about all three of the members of the Commonwealth. For if you're going to play with the Canada at War expansion, which I know a lot of people do. Um, and you got to ask yourself, is this tech? Am I taking this tech only because the United Kingdom can benefit from it? But what does that mean for Anzac and the FEC? Are they going to be able to benefit from it as well? And that might sway your decision a little bit. It's now FEC has more money to play with, generally, at least at the beginning, than the Anzac do. But the Anzac can save up their money, and maybe that's exactly what they want is a jet fighter or two to really go, and then those subs will team up with those jet fighters all around Australia to kind of just pick off whatever Japanese ships they can get their paws on. Um, is the FEC likely to be bombed to the point where they are going to want jet fighters ready to intercept? Probably not. It is perfectly feasible that the Japanese player does build medium bombers or maybe even strategic bombers to be able to bomb the major port or the shipyard or the factory in anticipation of wanting to go after the FEC on later turns. Sure, it is. Um, But is that enough to justify them building a jet fighter or two? I don't know. I don't know. But it is nice to have jet fighters when you start going on the offense with the FEC. So I just don't think that the Anzac and FEC benefit as much from jet fighters as the United Kingdom does. That isn't to say they're not worth it. I'm just saying that that's something that you want to keep at the back of your mind as you're planning things out. So long range aircraft. Yeah, this is a top tier for Britain. Absolutely a top tier for Britain for multiple reasons. So right off the bat, all other aircraft gain +1 movement. So you start off with it with the transport, and now that transport with the airbase, it could go 7. Now it could go 8. Well, that's an even breaking point, and so now the areas you can reach and come back to London or British Midlands just drastically increased. The range of that unit just increased drastically. And so, what that airborne unit can threaten, even if you don't have airborne doctrine, is pretty substantial. And the German player is going to have to think about that. Uh, and then, in that same vein, strategic bombers and heavy bombers gain +2 movement. So, from an airfield, they actually go 9. Now, that opens up a lot of possibilities for targeting the opponent and damaging their facilities all over the place. And I won't go into all the permutations of it. Just go in London and count out, 4 or 5, and then count that, and then look for places to land with friendly British heavy bombers, and you'll kind of go, wow, I can reach there. Oh, okay, sure, yeah. So that opens up a lot of possibilities. A lot of possibilities. So, not to mention, and now let's say you're coming and you're bombing Western Germany. Um, your fighters can only go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you got to have an aircraft carrier in the channel or some variation on that if you want to be able to escort into Western Germany. Well, now that you've got long range aircraft, you're starting off at an air base, +1 to your base movement. Your fighters can move 6, so now they can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so they can get back to London safe and sound. So now you can start sending 2 or 3 fighters with them to match whatever the Germans would send up. So you're doing, and then of course if you've got radar, you've got the edge even more. So he may even keep his fighters on the ground because he doesn't want to fight that battle because that could be bad for him. And then so you can start bombing with impunity. You can start bombing with impunity. The only thing you would have to worry about is, as the British at that point are flak shooting down your bombers, which is always a risk. But that's pretty good. That's great that you can now escort your fighters. And same thing, over here in France and other places. And there are other places you may want to bomb. You may want to start. You actually might want to bomb these shipyards to deny him the ability to have his transport move 3 and stymie his ability to reach certain areas if he's still threatening a sea lion. So yeah, long-range aircraft is absolutely worth it. Medium bombers gain +1 on map, and I do really like that one because heavy bombers shoot down. They when they want to go hunting for subs, they're hitting on 7s. They're not hitting on 3s like seaplanes. So that feels really good. The chances of you sinking a sub if you can reach it with that medium bomber is substantially higher. So I like that just that freedom that opens up. And seaplanes on map gain +1 if starting at a seaplane base. Now this is I'm not okay. They got to start at a seaplane base. You got to actually have a seaplane base to get this bonus. So it's conditional. But there are now certain nations will start with seaplane bases on the board. And so if you keep your seaplane base there and you get that, then, if you are in the British Midlands and you start counting out 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, the reach of your seaplane is now substantial. Of course, it's a seaplane, so you've only got a 25% chance of sinking the sub. But if you've kept your seaplane from the beginning and maybe you've built one more, great. Now, it is worth mentioning that if you do get ASW, your seaplanes start hitting on 5s. So and maybe you're playing against a German player who's very aggressive with your sub, and so you deliberately go ASW long range aircraft, so your seaplanes can actually get out there and have a better chance. They can actually get out really far and have a better chance at sinking the subs. So that'll just be that's one that is worth considering. So yeah, long range aircraft I consider top tier for Britain. Advanced subs, probably not. British subs do serve a purpose. They can raid this line. They can come in here and raid this line. I have talked about, building some up and having them come in here and actually attack the British or the German fleet with some air support when once I had gotten long range aircraft. It became an option in a game. I didn't do it, but subs can go through this strait even if the Denmark is German held, and they can raid these areas and they can raid these lines. Now, is that enough reason to go after advanced subs? Probably not. That isn't to say that England doesn't see a use for them. There is a use for them if they get them for some reason. And down here, you do have the Japanese that have to worry about these convoy lines. And I'm sure if ANZAC or FEC can drop an advanced sub or two, suddenly things become a lot more easy to sink these. And of course, they are better in combat if you want to get aggressive with them in that way. But is that really worth it? Probably not. In some ways, if you're going to go after advanced subs, this Wolfpack one is maybe more worth it because the British actually do have a fair amount of subs down here. Once the Dutch join the war, they have I want to say a coastal sub and at least one regular sub. ANZAC, I can't remember whether ANZAC no, I don't think they do. But you can argue that maybe this is a good spot to bring the existing British subs, put them down here, knowing you're going to go to war with Japan at some point, knowing they have these nice convoy lines to go after, and wolf packs will make that all that much sweeter when you can start doubling up in some of these areas and hitting them, and making and drawing that much more money out in that sense. But is that enough of a reason to go for it? I don't think it is. I just don't think advanced subs is worth it, especially when you're just not going to have that many tech dice as the Commonwealth. Okay. Large ship construction. I just don't think this one's worth it for the Commonwealth. I just don't. They're already cash strapped. It's already an 8. They're not going to get it till probably later in the game. While these pieces are absolutely impressive, they've got to actually pay to build them. And that's going to take time. And what are they really going to get out of them? The heavy battleship, in some ways, is the weaker choice of the two. A heavy fleet carrier is more of an advantage, I think, for Britain. It's more desirable because they can take their air power and project it in other directions and other ways that they hadn't been able to before. But is it worth spending a die roll every turn to then have to pay all this money to get something that is really big and beautiful? I don't think so. I don't think it's worth it for them. I think it's, it sounds great, but it just doesn't work out well for them. And they don't have any sort of their victory conditions aren't unlike the United States, whose victory conditions in some victory point depends on capital ships, and heavy capital ships count as 2 for that purposes. Yeah, that makes sense. But the UK doesn't have anything like that. And if the UK is going to struggle to build these, then, Anzac is going to be even more of a struggle in most cases, because they're only going to get $6 $9 a turn if they're lucky, and you're going to spend 7 of that just to build a heavy battleship without much probably other ships to go with it. And the heavy battleship really needs some ships to go with it. So yeah, I just don't think large ship construction is all that great for the Commonwealth, although I'm sure it would be fun. Heavy strat bombers. Kind of for the same reason I don't think large ship construction is worth it. I don't think these guys are worth it. Yes, they drop a lot more punch. They can support ground combats a lot better if you want to go that route with them. They're a little bit tougher in the air, but they still cost $13 to build. And I just don't see Britain having that much money. In some ways, I'd rather build medium bombers with Britain, keep my options open, and have them have with long-range aircraft and taking off from an airfield a range of 7. That can get the job done in most cases. Though dropping a strategic bomber just 1 to threaten even farther, forcing the German player to cover his backfield even more, is absolutely a valid thing to do. But is that worth it for heavy strategic bombers, especially when they're hitting on 9s? Probably not. I think you're far better off investing in something like jet fighters at that point. Now, I will say this. If you take, let's say, you're a Commonwealth player who goes up to 3 tech dice, and you want to roll for heavy strategic bombers, and you want to roll for long-range aircraft, and you want to roll for jet fighters, and those are your 3 techs. Those are your 3 primary techs, and all 3 of those techs are going to work together for having awesome jet fighters escorting at long ranges, while your heavy strategic bombers just do an absolute wreak havoc on the German industrial complex. I think there's something to be said about that. It at least sounds fun. Is it worth it? Well, obviously I don't think so. But I'm not saying that couldn't work out well. And that could be a lot of fun to play that way. And I have said before, I tend to judge I more or less judge each one on its own merits. But when you start pairing them up and you say, well, I'm going to go for this, I'm going to go for this as well, because they work well together. Well, absolutely, that changes the way you might put them in a tier. And so those 3 together, I think, actually could be a lot of fun to play with, if you really wanted to go that route. So if somebody really wants to try that, go for it and have fun with it. I don't see myself doing that. I think it's just too risky, and Britain just doesn't have the money to invest in it. I think you're better off investing in other directions, but that's me. And then Strat Rockets. Now, if you get Great Britain or the Commonwealth can get strategic rockets, they will be entering what is called a target rich environment. And that target rich environment is just that. There are plenty of facilities that they would love to just hit every turn. Not to mention this the German major factory here, or this factory in Paris. Start hitting the airfield every turn. Stop them from being able to scramble their fighters. There's a lot to be said about strategic rockets for the Commonwealth. More so the United Kingdom, less so. Yeah, Calcutta could build them. Less so for Calcutta, although let's say you do get them, and let's see, one, two, three. Yeah, they could hit that major port there, and maybe they want to do that every turn to just cause the Japanese player to lose access to that port. Then at that point, maybe they have to go after Cochin China or down here, because they wanted that extra reach to be able to go farther when they attack. So maybe there's a way to stymie them there. I'm not going to say it's impossible. Conversely, if they get that victory objective that allows them to put a factory down here in this area, well, maybe Calcutta wants to build one strategic rocket a turn and launch it to damage that factory. So yeah, there could be a use down there. I don't think it's likely, but sure. Anzac, not so much. They would need to bring it up. They just don't have many targets. Even if you bring it up to the northern Australia, they just don't have many targets that are worth hitting with strategic rockets. Um, so I just don't see it being worth it for them. But never say never. Um, so I think strategic rockets for Britain would be a lot of fun if you can get them. Therein lies the problem. They're 9. They'd be fun to play with. Excuse me, they're 9. They'd be fun to play with. But I think you're better off going for other, more reliable technologies that will give you better bonuses right away, as fun as strategic rockets would be for the UK. And improved logistics. Is is improved logistics worth it for the Commonwealth? I think there's an argument for it. I think there's an argument for it. So, doubling your strategic rail moving capacity in all regions. Now, that's everywhere in the Commonwealth. So, Britain, if they're the UK, yeah, Britain, the British Isles themselves would go up to 8. Africa would go up to 2, and then possibly 4, assuming you have the rail line connected and you've got that victory objective. Now, being able to shuffle 4 units around up and down wherever you need them, that's going to feel really good, especially if you've got a Italian player who thinks he's going to get hinky and maybe come after Tanganyika, knowing you don't have a lot. But then all of a sudden, you can drop 4 units the turn before he wants to do it into that area and go, no, we're not going to play that game. Yeah, you know what? That opens up some real possibilities there. That would be a lot of fun. Um, if they're the rail lines here, and I know some of these rail lines will be a little bit different. I believe there's one that actually runs through Iran now. So if Iran becomes British, that maybe doubling that up to 2 would be super important for getting units back and forth, depending on the circumstances. But I don't know exactly how that pans out yet. But you could, let's say you fight the Italians all the way back here and you want to link up these rail lines so that you can just shift back and forth to keep the Italians from coming back in. There's something to be said about that. There's something to be said. India has an inherent rail capacity of 1. Um, and maybe you've built another factory over here, Delhi will be a city. Maybe you build another factory over there as a fallback factory. But you got improved factories, so you're building 2 units there a turn, and it'd be nice to be able to rail them right to where you need them, depending on, I think Japan's threatening Maharashtra. Let's get some guys over there, or, well, they could walk, I would assume. But nope, let's just 2 guys from Haryana a turn into Calcutta. Yeah, that opens up some possibilities. Even Anzac might find that useful to be able to rail guys back and forth from Western Australia all of a sudden. Though they only have a rail capacity of 2 with improved logistics. So Is that enough to go for it by itself? No. But let's look at what else it offers. Able to strategic movements across the different gauges. Probably not going to come up very often, if at all. Never say never, but I don't see that happening. +1 strategic naval movement. Assuming that the UK has the Empire, the Sun Never Sets, I believe it is, where they still have all their Empire, and they have an inherent one of 3. Yeah, because they start off with 2, they get 3 for that, or they get a third point for that, and so this would give them a 4th point. Is that anything to write home about? I don't think so. But again, maybe you're somebody who really does rely on that strategic naval movement to shuffle units around and shuffle your transports around. So I'm not going to say it's worthless, but is that enough of a reason by itself to go after improved logistics? Probably not. And then moving factories in home country. Now, the only 2 parts of the Commonwealth that can do this. Now, in theory, if you're playing with the Canadian expansion, they could do it. But now, of course, the Canadian expansion will change. I know it's a very highly played one, so I think it's worth mentioning. They're probably never going to need to move that factory, so not that big of a deal. But the one in Africa, South Africa, cannot do that because they don't count this. I will double check that. I don't think they count as home country. You know what? That's the USSR. Let's double check something while I'm thinking about it. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about South Africa being considered home country for the purposes of things built within South Africa. Um, so because I believe that South Africa is going to have its own roundels in this edition, kind of like Canada does, but it's not considered its own country like or political or major military subdivision like the FEC is, because the FEC really wasn't its own country. They sort of just broke it off to show the logistics of the Commonwealth and some of the logistical problems they had, but it wasn't its own country, unlike ANZAC in Canada, which were their own countries. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to double check that before I said. So they can't move that factory. India cannot move any of its factories that are built there. ANZAC could move a factory. Now, are they going to want to move this factory? Probably not. It's already in a really good spot in Sydney. But maybe a bizarre thing happens where Japan is threatening Sydney, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to pack up and come over here, and I think I've got better odds of protecting it over there. Probably not. I don't know. I'm trying to think outside the box, but I'm just not seeing any reason to move the Sydney factory. Um, Unless maybe you really want your point of production to be up here in Queensland. So you're dropping units in Queensland, making it easier to come and pick up units from Queensland when it comes to retaking these islands. I could see that, possibly, as a possibility. But is that a reason to take it in and of itself? Probably not. But let's go back to the rest of it. Now, what other options do we have? Now, let's say that this factory in London is being bombed to hell, and you're just not able to build the fighters to keep them at bay. But you do have improved logistics, so maybe you go and you take it and you rail it up to northern England or Scotland. Does that keep him out of range of your bombers? It does not, but it may keep him out of range of being able to send escorting fighters, because here in London, it's easy to kind of set, just standard fighters here in Picardy or Belgium can go 1-2 and escort any bombers coming from Western Germany. And then you just go 1-2 back to these 2 areas, assuming that they're well protected enough that you're not going to get an amphibious invasion. We're talking, I guess, earlier war here. But then it rolls around where Britain can go ahead and get their factory out of there and move it up here to northern England or Scotland. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I don't have any air bases here, and even and that's with long-range aircraft. So here from Western Germany, one, two, three, four, five, six. So he would need to have long-range aircraft with his fighters in Western Germany to be able to escort his bombers up to one of these two territories. So if he doesn't have that, it might be worth it to move that factory out of the way, give yourself some breathing room. You have improved logistics, so you can rail 8 guys down to London of return from Northern England. So maybe that's a play. And again, maybe it just works out that way. But is any of this that I've said about improved logistics a reason enough for the United Kingdom to take it? I don't think so. I think it kind of like strategic rockets. It would be fun to have. You would use it to its maximum usefulness every game you had it because you're going to use all of your pieces to their maximum value. Um, but is it worth it to go after? I don't think so. I think you're better off going for other technologies that are going to give better yields far sooner, far more consistently. So yeah, that's how I feel about the Commonwealth and the technologies for it. Um, Let me know if there's any kind of caveat to these technologies that maybe I missed, anything I said wrong, anything that maybe I didn't take into consideration that you think is worth mentioning. Or maybe you just think, I think you're flat out wrong. You gotta, that one there you said they should go after. I don't think they should go after at all. Or oh my God, you don't automatically put ASW on top tier or whatever the case is. Um, yeah, let me know in the comments below. Give me some feedback. And next up will be France. Yes, I said it. France. Winter mute out.